Alright, this is the third video of this calculator workshop that I'm doing, and in this one we're going to look at actually graphing things using one of these TI-83 or 84 graphing calculators. Alright, so first off, when you have to graph things on the calculator, the buttons you use for graphing are all along the top up here. Alright, so you have the Y equals, you have the window, zoom, trace, and then the graph button. And then above those, notice in blue is some other stuff. So to get that stuff in blue, you hit the second and then get to those things. All right, so we'll look at quite a few of those things in this video here, and graph a couple functions to see what they look like. All right, so the first one we're going to look at here is the window key, all right, which is the second one over next to the Y equals. So if you hit the window, right, that's telling you how the calculator is setting up the screen that you're going to be looking at when you look at your graph. Right, so notice we have X minimum and X maximum. Right, so X minimum is the smallest X value you're going to see. X max is the biggest X value you see. So that kind of sets your screen from left to right. Right, your smallest X value is on the left side. Your biggest X value obviously is going to be on the right side. And then the X scale, which mine is set to 1, that's just how often your calculator is going to put one of those little tick marks along the X-axis. So it's going to put a tick mark at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's going to count by ones. Right, so you can change that if you want to, but it's not really necessary. And then below that we have the Y min and Y max. Right, so the Y min is the smallest Y value. That's going to be the bottom of the screen that you see on the calculator, and then the Y max is the highest Y value. That's going to be the top of the screen that you see. Right, so you can change the numbers here to get a bigger picture of the graph or a smaller picture by changing those numbers. You can set up the window that you'll be viewing the graph on. Okay, the one below that, the Y scale, again, that's how it puts the tick marks along the Y-axis going up and down. And then the res, the X-res, that stands for the resolution. You can just leave that alone. It's preset to 1. Honestly, I've never changed it to anything else. If you want to play with it, go ahead. But just remember that if you do play with it and it does something weird, that it should be set at 1. That's normal. So, if it messes stuff up, just go back and change it to 1 again. All right, so that's our window key. And then to get out of the window key, just like we saw in the last video with the menus, if I hit second and then the mode button to quit, it takes me back out to the main screen. All right, so let's go about graphing a function. The first function we're going to graph is y equals 3x plus 5. All right, so to type in the equation that I want to graph, I use that y equals screen. All right, so I hit y equals, and notice on my screen I've got 7 functions or 7 y equals. I have y1 down to y7. So you can graph more than one equation at a time, and for some types of problems you may need to do that. Right? In this case though, we're just going to do one just to kind of keep it simple and give you an idea of how to do this stuff. All right, so there's my y1. So I'm going to type y equals 3x minus 5 into that y1. Right? So it already has the y equals. Right? So I don't have to type this part of the equation in there. That's already there with that y1 equals. I just have to type the 3x minus 5. Right? So 3, and then to type in the x, this button up here next to the alpha, it has x, t, theta, n. That's your generic variable button. Right? So if I hit that, it's going to give me my variable x. Right? So even if your equation, like say it was y equals 3t minus 5, when you put it in your calculator, just always type the variable as an x. Right? And those other ones there, the t, the theta, the n, that's if you watched the last video and we looked at the mode menu and we had like different modes. We can change it to like parametric equations or like polar coordinates. Those are the variables you use if you change it to one of those other modes, right? But if you're leaving it in the normal mode, your variable is just going to be an x. All right, so 3x and then minus 5. All right, so I type y1 equals 3x minus 5. You can hit enter to go down to y2, and then that's what we got, right? So there's our equation. We typed it in, and then double check your window, right? Your window, the preset window is the minimums are -10 and the maximums are +10, right? And if your window is not set to that, rather than typing all those numbers in, there's a quicker way to do it. If you hit the zoom button, which is the one in the middle up here, right? Zoom button, it has a bunch of preset windows you can use, so you can zoom in and zoom out. They also have a z decimal, z square, z standard, z trig. So, if you're graphing trigonometric functions, you might want to hit that 7 there, and then it zooms into a screen that's appropriate for viewing a lot of trigonometric functions. Right? The standard window is the one we're talking about, where it goes between -10 and +10. Right? So if you ever have to change the window, which for some problems you will have to change your window in order to see the graph, to get it back to the normal standard window, just hit the zoom button, and then you can just hit the number 6, and that'll take you to the standard window, and it will also just draw that graph. All right, so there we have We have the x-axis going across, we have the y-axis going up and down, right? The x-axis goes from -10 to +10, the y goes from -10 to +10, and then that line we have going through, that's the graph of the equation y equals 3x minus 5. Right? So graphing something on the calculator, not that hard to do, right? You just go to the y equals, you type in the equation, again, make sure you use this x button up here for your variable, and then you either hit the zoom 6 or you just hit the graph button and it draws the graph for you. All right, so that's our graph of 3x minus 5. All right, not too bad. One thing I want to show you on the graph here, if I hit the trace button, right, that's the one that's over on the right side but not all the way to the right. All right, the trace button, notice it puts a little cursor on the graph there, and it tells me at the top the equation of the graph that I'm on, right, y1 equals 3x minus 5, and at the bottom it gives me the x and y coordinates of the point where that cursor is. Right, so it's telling me that this point on the graph is at x equals 0, y equals -5. And then I can use the arrows left and right, to move along the graph, and notice the cursor moving as I press the arrow, and as I move, on the bottom there, it gives me the new x and y coordinates for the new point I've gotten to. All right, so if you need to find some points on your graph, you can use this trace thing and move the arrows over left or right. You can go either way, and every time wherever you stop, it gives you the x and y coordinates for that point. Right? Notice though that when you do that, most of the x and y coordinates do not come out to nice numbers. Right? The one I'm at now is x equals -1.06383, y equals I don't even want to read that number. Right? Just crazy decimal numbers. So it's not like it skips from x equals 0 to x equals 1 to x equals 2. It doesn't go in a nice pattern like that. It just moves a little bit, and you get like weird decimals when you do this, right? But that trace button, it just moves along your graph and it gives you the x and y coordinates, all right? So that's one of the cool things you can do with a graph on your calculator. All right, to get out of the to get rid of this graph, if I hit the y equals button, or if I want to just quit to the main screen, right, you can do second mode, and that takes you back to the main screen of the calculator where you can do some calculations. To clear out the graph, if I do y equals, I'm back into that menu where I typed in the equation. If you just hit the clear button, it just clears away what you typed for the y1, and now that equation is gone from your calculator. All right, so that's graphing a pretty simple equation. Another one, y equals x squared plus 2. All right, so I'm already in the y equals screen. I do x, right, so that same button there for the variable x. And then to do squared, I hit that x squared button that we saw on a previous video, right, so x squared and then plus 12. All right, so there's my equation, y1 equals x squared plus 12. I hit enter to get down out of that equation. And then if I hit the graph button, all right, so the graph button over here to graph that equation, notice the little things up here, I don't know if you saw it, but it was like kind of moving around. That means your calculator was working to draw the graph. And then when it stops, that means that the graph is drawn. But notice that all we see is the x and y axis. The graph of the equation is not here. All right, so what does that mean? Does it mean that there is no graph of this equation? Well, no. Every equation has a graph to it. So there is a graph to this. We're just not seeing it. What it means is that our window is not the right size to see the graph. Right? This graph does not appear between -10 and +10 on the x and y axes. All right, so we're going to have to change the window in order to actually see this graph. And like I said a couple minutes ago, that's one of the things you're going to have to do when you're graphing. Not every graph fits nicely on that standard window, right, as we can see here. Now, if you know anything about functions, right, the graph of x squared is a parabola that opens upward, right, so it goes something like that. And then the plus 12 takes this parabola, which normally sits right on the x-axis, and moves it up 12 units. Right, so the graph is going to look like this, but it's starting at y equals 12, which is why we're not seeing it, because our top y value here, our y maximum, is only 10. Right, and the lowest y value on this graph is going to be 12. So knowing that, if I go back to the window, all right, my x-min and my x-max, I don't think I need to change those. Left to right is fine. It's the up and down that's causing a problem with this one. And if I go to my y maximum, let's make the y maximum 30 instead of 10. All right, just picking a bigger number than 10, and I hit enter, and then the graph button again. And now notice my y-axis goes a lot higher now. It goes from -10 down here, but now it goes all the way up to +30. And now I can actually see the graph of my parabola for y equals x squared plus 12. Right, so when you're graphing on the calculator, having some knowledge of what the graph is supposed to look like is definitely helpful. as far as figuring out what numbers to put in the window. Like if I know that this is going to be up 12 and then it's going to go up from there, I know I need to make my y values higher in order to see the graph. If you don't know that, and you look at this and you're like, well, I have no idea what this graph is supposed to look like, so I'm clueless. What you want to do then is just kind of type in numbers into that window and see what happens. Right? Make the x's a little bigger, make the y's a little bigger, and just keep moving them around until you finally get to see the picture that you're looking for. Right, so having that knowledge definitely helps out. It definitely makes it easier to help out, or to find the graphs. All right, something else I want to show you is the table feature. All right, so if you notice above the graph button it says table. This is a really cool thing that your calculator does as well. So if I hit second and then graph, right, it takes me into the table menu. And notice your table, if you've never used this before, probably the first x value you see at the top is 0, and then it's probably counting 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 going down. And then in the next column, it gives you the y values. All right, so this table feature is literally telling me a bunch of points on the graph of the function or the equation y equals x squared plus 12. Right, so this calculator is saying that when x is equal to -2, y is 16. When x is -1, y is 13. When x is 0, y is 12, and so on. And you can scroll up or down on the x values, to see more negative numbers, or I can scroll down to see further down the list and see some more positive x values. Right, so this is something else you can use when you're trying to graph something. Like if you graph it on the standard window like we just did and we don't see it, and we're not sure where to go or what to change things to in order to see it, you can go to that table thing, and your table is giving you a bunch of y values. So if I look at this table, I can see, well, my y values are 28, 21, 16, 13, 12, 13, 16. The lowest one looks like it's 12. So let me make my y values higher, my y maximum on that window screen. Let me make that bigger, and then I'll be able to see this graph. Right? So that's one of those, those important things that your calculator does, is give you all these x and y values for whatever function you have in that y equals screen. And then you can kind of use that to give you a clue of how to change the numbers in order to see the graph. Right? So that's a good thing to do. If you want to change the table for some reason, right? Just like the window button over here changes the size of the graph that we're looking at, above window it says table set. So if I do second window, I can set up my table. Right? So my table right now is starting at -4, and the delta table, right, that little triangle, means it's counting by 1. Right? But I can count by whatever I want. So I can start my table at 0 if I want to, and I can count by 0.1. All right? And then if I go back to the table, now it's 0, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. So if you need to kind of zoom in a little bit on the numbers that you're seeing, you can change your table to not only count by 1s, but you can count by 0.5s. Or if you need to see bigger numbers, you can count by like hundreds or thousands or 500s or whatever it is that you want to change it to, in order to get numbers that you're going to see on your graph or values of your function. All right, so let me change that back to what it was so it doesn't mess me up for later. Let me change my delta table to 1. All right, so that's that table set feature. Right? You can have your table start at any value you want and count by however many values you want. So your x values don't have to go up by 1. They can go up by whatever you choose. All right, let's go and do one more thing real quick here. The table ask feature. All right, so I'm going to type this in now. So I go back to my y equals, I hit clear, and now I'm going to type in a new function, 9/5 x plus 32. So I'm going to put the 9/5 in parentheses to keep that fraction together. Right, so 9/5 x and then plus 32. And if you don't recognize this, this is the formula for converting from Celsius to Fahrenheit, I believe, or is it the other way around? It's from Celsius to Fahrenheit, yeah. So this is how you convert Celsius degrees into Fahrenheit degrees. Anyway, in order to do that, I'm going to go back to the table set, and now for the stuff down here, this independent and dependent, I'm going to change my independent variable to ask. All right, remember, the independent variable refers to your x values. The dependent refers to the y values. So I'm going to say that's ask and then do second table. And notice now my table is blank. It's waiting for me to type in what x value I want. So if I want to change 0 degrees Celsius to Fahrenheit, over here I type x equals 0 and hit enter. And then it tells me that the Fahrenheit is 32. Right, if I want to change 100 degrees Celsius into Fahrenheit, I type x equals 100, and then it gives me the corresponding Celsius, which is 212. Right, so that's another powerful thing your calculator does. You can type in a function, and then just type in here whatever values you want for x, and it automatically tells you the y. All right, so that's a little bit of stuff with graphing on the calculator. In the next video, we're going to look at some more graphing stuff like finding intercepts and intersections and stuff like that. So make sure you check out that other video as well.